So in my last video, I discussed 4 of the worst contract signings of the offseason. This, of course, following some prior videos on my critique of some of the rookie max extensions that were handed out this summer. But because I don't want to simply come off as being hypercritical and negative, I thought it would be a good time to discuss some of the best offseason signings of 2024, why they were great moves, and how it benefits the team they signed with. And while I'm going through these, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments on these signings as well. As always, if you're new to the channel, you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe to help the channel grow, and in return, I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Now, very similar to my last video on the worst signings of the offseason, which by the way, I'll leave linked in the description in case you missed it, but a few call outs on this one and caveats when going through these are purely offseason signings or sign-in trades. I will not be discussing or ranking any trades that happen this offseason. And also a big factor in what makes any of these given signings a good deal is circumstantial relative to the team's current direction, timeline, and financial situation. And I'm going to start with one that some actually said was an overpay, and I, for one, cannot for the life of me figure out why they would say that. I would actually argue it's one of the best free agency signings of the offseason, and that was Isaiah Hartenstein signing with the Oklahoma City Thunder for 3 years, $87 million. Now look, I get it. You see iHeart's annual figure just shy of $30 million a year, and it raises eyebrows a bit for a guy like Hartenstein. But when you break it down, this is actually an incredible deal for the Thunder and also exactly what they needed to fill out their roster. iHeart, when he was moved to the starting lineup for the Knicks, really started to shine and impacted the game in so many ways with his rim protection, offensive rebounding for second chance opportunities, and post play in the paint. You look at his raw numbers and nothing really jumps out at you when he's putting up 8 and 8 on the season, but Hartenstein had one of the highest on-off ratings in the entire league, top 10 in the league to be exact, at a whopping plus 11 and an on-court rating of plus 10.4. And he also was second highest in box plus minus for the Knicks last season, only behind Jalen Brunson, and second in overall win shares, again only behind Brunson, and was third in the league, in the entire league, in defensive box plus minus. In short, the Knicks were significantly better when Hartenstein was on the court, with his ability to impact the game on both sides of the ball. Like, I feel like people aren't really talking about this enough with how much of a loss this is going to be for the Knicks when everyone has been so focused on them adding Bridges, like that's going to put them over the top to win a championship. They lost their second most impactful player that translated to winning, and they have thus far not been able to find a replacement for him. And then the other reason I like this signing so much is because the team that he's going to be going to in the Thunder. Like, if Hartenstein had signed this deal with, say, the Pistons or the Hornets, I wouldn't have been as much of a fan of the contract because Hartenstein wouldn't have made sense for those teams and what they're trying to build. But for the Thunder, a team that had the cap space to make a big signing, this of course was after they already just traded for Alex Caruso to bolster their defense even further, and now you add one of the best defensive bigs in the game, adding all of this with their already talented young roster that just finished first in the Western Conference. This team is going to be so dominant on defense, probably the best defensive team in the league, with a team that already finished 4th in the league on offense last season, and now they add a true center to enable Chet to play the 4, where he's more comfortable and more effective. Also, it's a 3-year deal for a player who just turned 26, so you lock him up for the rest of his prime, and if it doesn't work out, this becomes a much more tradable contract than if it was a 4 or 5-year deal. The next guy I have on this list is Obi Toppin, who the Pacers re-signed for 4 years, $58 million, which is kind of odd for me because I've never been a fan of Toppin. I thought his game didn't really translate to winning when coming into the league, but he has since improved a lot of aspects of his game, playing much smarter basketball, better shot selection and decision making. He's been able to reduce his overall turnover percentage and shot the 3 ball the best he had in his career last year at 40%, albeit on low volume at 3 attempts per game. And more importantly, he played in all 82 games last year for the Pacers, which in an era of basketball that is riddled with injuries and load management is a pretty big feat nowadays to play in all 82 games. Availability is the #1 ability. Now, Toppin's never going to be a star in this league. He's not going to be that piece that puts you over the top, but he is a quality role player that can get you some scoring and floor spacing on offense, and for his flaws, he is a hustle player and gives it his all when he's on the court. And signing a 26-year-old to a 4-year deal at $58 million when he's barely making more than the mid-level exception and will ultimately fall below the mid-level exception by the final year of his contract with the rise in the salary cap, for Toppin to be making 10% of the overall cap at his production is a solid signing and one that will work out well for the Pacers. Next in the list, I've got Buddy Hield, who the Warriors acquired in that sign and trade for a deal of 4 years, $37 million. Some might say this one is odd to call a good signing when you're signing a 31-year-old player to a 4-year deal who was out of the rotation in the playoffs last year for the Sixers, his first playoff appearance in his 9-year NBA career, by the way. And look, while Hield has always had his challenges on defense and can be a very streaky player on offense, you also can't deny he's one of the best shooters in the NBA. Just the season before this one, he shot a whopping 42.5% from deep on over 8 attempts per game. That's insanely efficient. Last year, those numbers dipped a bit to 38%, but still a very high percentage for the kind of volume he puts up from 3. And going back to what I was saying about Obi Toppin, man is always available, rarely gets injured. Last season, he played 84 games, given he was traded mid-season and got to play 2 extra games. He's never played in less than 70 games in his entire career, but the reason I like this signing the most is the fit with the Warriors. Now, I don't think the signing is suddenly making the Warriors a contending team as they're currently constructed. I don't see them doing much better than the 7th or 8th seed in the West, but pairing Hield alongside Steph, having 2 of the greatest shooters in the game of basketball, you lose one splash brother in Klay Thompson, but now you've got a new splash brother to make the Warriors even more of a threat from outside. And you know Hield is going to be getting plenty of open looks from deep with so much focus and attention being placed on Steph Curry. It's why I like this signing and also the figure they were able to get him for, at where he's going to be making less than $10 million per year, where his salary is going to be just 6% of the cap in that first year and is going to get more and more favorable over time. That's a nice pickup for the Warriors on a cheap deal after losing Klay Thompson. Another guy I have on this list is Saddiq Bey, who the Wizards signed to a 3-year, $19 million deal. This is really just a great low-dollar value contract of taking a guy on a flyer who is still young, talented, built well, and skilled for his size, but is coming off a major injury that will likely sideline him for a good portion of next season. And like some of these other guys on the list, Bey certainly has his flaws as it relates to his poor defense, inefficient scoring at times, but for me, this is more about the value the Wizards are getting here at a low-risk, high-reward scenario for a player who is still relatively young, only 25, and getting him for a super low-value deal at just a little over $6 million per year, about half of the total mid-level exception. For a Wizards team that is in a full-blown rebuild in the tank for flag sweepstakes, it's not really going to matter to them whether Bey plays this season or not, but it will give them a player with some upside in the following season that isn't going to give them a huge hit to their cap sheet while he's under his current deal. For a player that can consistently give you 13 to 15 points per game, can rebound pretty well for a small forward, and can space the floor, although he really struggled shooting from 3 last season, getting a player like that for 3 years, $19 million, when there are guys putting up similar type production, making more than double of that, is a great offseason signing for the Wizards. And then finally, I've got 2 guys on vet minimum deals that I think were absolute steals for the teams that were able to sign them, in large part because cap space had dried up and these guys didn't have much of a choice but to take the minimum, but that's Tyus Jones and Gary Trent Jr. I'll start with Tyus Jones, who just recently signed with the Suns on a 1-year, $3 million deal. So we knew Jones likely wasn't going to be returning to the Wizards next season, just didn't fit their timeline. He was a free agent, but given his production, his high-level playmaking as a true point guard, great facilitator who can also shoot it well from deep and playing off the ball, generally speaking, he's a very underrated player. Didn't start out that well in the league and took him a bit to get where he is today and being one of the better playmaking guards in the league. And because of his improved efficiency on offense, I thought for sure this guy was going to be in for a solid payday, even if it was in a backup role on a contending team. But like a lot of the current free agents still available around the NBA, while they may be worth more than a minimum deal, when teams simply don't have the cap space to sign you, you're kind of left holding the bag and taking whatever you can get at that point. And so Jones ultimately had to settle for a 1-year deal at $3 million, far below his market value. And for a Phoenix Suns team that had such little flexibility from a financial perspective to make moves on the margins to improve their roster, and it will probably be a last-ditch effort to win a title with their super team, to get a playmaking guard like Jones, something they need for a low-risk signing at just 1 year for the vet minimum deal, is a steal for that team. And then as far as Gary Trent Jr. goes, I'm actually shocked he settled for the minimum at 1 year, $2.6 million. It's been reported that he had offers out there much higher, including from the Raptors, but opted to go play for a contender for the minimum. take the 1-year deal, bet on himself, and test free agency in 2025 when more teams are expected to have cap space, with a rising salary cap of 10% expected next season. And this is another ironic one for me because I've also never been a fan of Trent's game. I always viewed him as an inefficient, streaky player who doesn't impact winning. But again, something that is so coveted in today's NBA, he shoots threes at a high rate on a high clip at near 40% on over 6 attempts per game. Not really that great on much of anything else, but he's a reliable outside shooter that can play on and off the ball. And for the Bucks, who had no cap space to work with, they just lost their main outside threat in Malik Beasley in free agency. To bring a young player that has a proven track record on a 1-year min deal that they could potentially look to re-sign the following offseason if things work out is a great pickup for a team that otherwise has kind of a bleak future. Anyway, so there are my list of off-season signings so far this summer that have been the best and will likely pay off well for their respective teams. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.